Sarah Chen stood in the marble lobby of the Whitmore Estate auction house, holding her daughter's hand, feeling every judgmental stare from the wealthy crowd around her. She wore her best dress, the navy one she saved for job interviews, but next to women draped in designer labels and men in tailored suits, she felt invisible. Her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, tugged at her sleeve, pointing at the glass cases displaying antiques and artifacts that would be auctioned that afternoon. Sarah had saved for 3 months to afford the entrance fee, hoping to find one affordable piece she could resell to help pay their mounting bills. Her husband had passed away 18 months ago, leaving her with debts she never knew existed and a daughter to raise alone. She worked 2 jobs now, cleaning offices at night and waitressing during the day, but it was never enough. This auction felt like her last chance to change something, to find one opportunity that might turn their situation around. Lily pressed her face against a display case, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at a collection of old porcelain figures. A security guard moved toward them, ready to ask them to step back, when a voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "I wouldn't touch anything if I were you," the voice said, smooth and cold. Sarah turned to see Richard Ashford, the real estate developer whose face appeared regularly in the society pages. He was known for buying entire estates, gutting them, and reselling the contents for enormous profit. He looked at Sarah with the kind of dismissive expression reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. "These pieces are quite valuable," he continued, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "I'm sure they're well beyond your price range." Sarah felt heat rise to her face, but she kept her voice steady. "We have every right to be here. I paid the entrance fee." Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course. Though I must say, I've been coming to these auctions for 20 years, and I've never seen someone like you actually walk away with anything worthwhile." He turned to leave, but Lily suddenly spoke up. "That one is broken," she said, pointing at a porcelain vase in the case Richard had been examining. Richard stopped, turning back with amusement. "I beg your pardon?" Lily kept her finger on the glass. "Inside, there's a crack, a bad one." Sarah quickly pulled her daughter's hand down. "Lily, we don't just say things like that." But Richard was now interested. He called over the auction house manager, a thin man named Gerald, who appeared immediately at the mention of Richard's name. "The child claims this vase is damaged," Richard said, pointing to an 18th century Chinese vase listed in the catalog at $15,000. Gerald looked uncomfortable. "Sir, all our pieces are authenticated and inspected. That vase came from the Morrison collection. It's pristine." Lily shook her head. "It's cracked on the inside, near the bottom. The crack goes up like this." She traced a line in the air with her finger, showing the exact pattern. Gerald's discomfort turned to irritation. "Madam, please control your child. Making false claims about our inventory is a serious matter." Sarah apologized and tried to guide Lily away, but Richard held up his hand. "Actually, I'd like to see for myself. Gerald, have someone bring it out for examination." Gerald protested that it would disrupt the display, but Richard's influence was absolute. Within minutes, a conservator arrived with specialized equipment. She examined the vase carefully, using a small light to peer inside the narrow opening. Her expression changed. "There is a crack," she said quietly. "Hairline fracture. Internal, running approximately 4 inches from the base. It's not visible from the outside, but it's definitely there." The lobby went quiet. Gerald's face turned pale. Richard stared at Lily with new interest. "How did you know that?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "I can see it. I can see what's wrong with things." Sarah's heart was pounding. This wasn't the first time Lily had done something like this. 2 weeks ago, at a thrift store, Lily had pointed at a painting and said it had another painting underneath. The owner had laughed it off, but Sarah had seen the look in her daughter's eyes, that certain knowing that she couldn't explain. At home, Lily would touch objects and describe their history, tell Sarah if something was going to break before it did, point out hidden defects in things that looked perfect. Sarah had thought it was just a child's imagination, the way kids sometimes do. But this was different. This was public, witnessed, undeniable. Richard crouched down to Lily's eye level. "What else can you see?" he asked. Before Sarah could intervene, Lily pointed to a bronze sculpture across the room. "That one isn't real, it's a copy." Richard stood up, his eyes gleaming. He walked to the sculpture, studied it, then called Gerald over again. "I want this piece authenticated. Right now." Gerald stammered that it had already been authenticated, that it came with full provenance. But Richard insisted. Another expert was called, this one specializing in bronze work. 20 minutes later, the verdict came back. The sculpture was indeed a reproduction, likely made in the 1960s, not the 19th century original it was claimed to be. The auction house erupted in controlled chaos. Gerald was on the phone. Other staff members were reviewing items, and the wealthy patrons who had been eyeing various lots were now questioning everything. Richard turned back to Sarah and Lily, and for the first time, he looked at them not with dismissal, but with calculation. "We need to talk," he said. He led them to a private room off the main gallery, a space usually reserved for serious buyers conducting private viewings. Sarah held Lily close, uncertain what was happening. Richard closed the door and studied them both carefully. "Your daughter has a gift," he said. "A genuine, verifiable gift. Do you understand what that means?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't understand any of this. She's always been able to see things, but I thought it was just her imagination." Richard paced the room. "I've spent 2 decades in this business. I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on fakes, on damaged goods, on items that weren't what they claimed to be. The best experts in the world make mistakes. But your daughter, she didn't make a mistake. She saw things that required specialized equipment to verify." He stopped pacing and looked directly at Sarah. "I want to hire you both. I have a private collection I'm acquiring from the Vanderbilt estate. 73 pieces, everything from paintings to jewelry to furniture. The auction is in 2 weeks. If your daughter can examine those pieces before I bid, she could save me from making very expensive errors or help me identify undervalued items that everyone else has missed." Sarah's mind raced. "I don't know if that's appropriate. She's 6 years old." Richard named a figure. $50,000 for 1 day's work. Sarah's breath caught. That was more than she made in a year at both her jobs combined. That would clear her debts, give her breathing room, let her actually be present for her daughter, instead of working herself to exhaustion. But something about it felt wrong, like she was exploiting Lily's ability, whatever it was. "I need time to think about it," Sarah said. Richard nodded. "I understand, but understand this too. Your daughter has something rare. People will want to use it. I'm at least being honest about my intentions. Others won't be." He handed Sarah a business card. "You have 48 hours to decide." He left the room, and Sarah sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs, pulling Lily onto her lap. "Baby, how do you know these things?" she asked. Lily thought about it, her small face serious. "I just see it, Mama. Like when you know something is wrong with someone by looking at their face. I look at things, and I know what's wrong with them, or what's special about them, or what they used to be." Sarah hugged her daughter tight. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in their small apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside, thinking about Richard's offer. $50,000. It would change everything. But at what cost? Was she supposed to parade her daughter in front of wealthy collectors, turning her gift into a commodity? What kind of life would that be for Lily? The next morning, Sarah called in sick to her waitressing shift. She needed to understand what was happening before she made any decisions. She took Lily to the public library and found books on psychic phenomena, extrasensory perception, anything that might explain her daughter's ability. Most of it seemed like nonsense, but a few accounts caught her attention. There were documented cases of people who could sense defects in materials, who had an intuitive understanding of an object's authenticity or condition. It wasn't magic, exactly. The book suggested it might be an extreme form of pattern recognition, a brain that processed visual and tactile information in unusual ways. Whatever the explanation, Lily had it. That afternoon, Sarah's sister Rachel came over. Sarah told her everything, showed her the business card, explained the offer. Rachel listened, then spoke carefully. "You know I love Lily, and I know things have been hard since Marcus died. But $50,000 for 1 day? What happens after that? Does Richard come back with more requests? Do other people hear about it? Where does it end?" Sarah nodded. Those were her fears too. But Rachel wasn't finished. "On the other hand, you're drowning. I see it every time I visit. You're exhausted, you're stressed, and Lily needs her mother present, not working 80 hours a week. If this money gives you that chance, maybe it's worth it. One time. Set boundaries, make it clear it's not ongoing, and take the opportunity." That night, Sarah made her decision. She called Richard and agreed to his terms, but with conditions. 1 day only. Lily would not be photographed or publicly identified. Any findings she made would be kept confidential between Sarah, Richard, and the auction house. Richard agreed immediately. The day of the private viewing arrived. Richard sent a car to pick them up, a sleek black sedan that felt absurdly luxurious. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the city pass by as they drove to a private estate in the countryside where the Vanderbilt collection was being held. The estate was enormous, a sprawling mansion with manicured grounds. Inside, the 73 pieces were displayed in a converted ballroom. Richard was there, along with a single assistant and a curator who would document Lily's observations. Sarah felt her stomach twist with anxiety, but Lily seemed calm, almost excited. "Can I look at them, Mama?" she asked. Sarah nodded, and Lily began to walk slowly through the room. She didn't touch anything at first, just observed, moving from piece to piece with careful attention. Then she stopped in front of a painting, a landscape attributed to a minor Hudson River School artist. "This one is more important than you think," Lily said. Richard came over immediately. "What do you mean?" Lily pointed to the corner of the canvas. "There's another signature underneath. A bigger artist painted it first, then someone else painted over it later." The curator stepped in with a portable X-ray fluorescence device, typically used to analyze paint layers. After several minutes of scanning, she confirmed Lily's observation. "There's definitely an underlayer with a different signature. It appears to be... I need to verify this, but it might be Frederick Church." Richard's eyes went wide. Church was one of the most valuable Hudson River School painters. If this painting had one of his works underneath, its value would increase exponentially. They moved on. Lily examined a set of jewelry, identified a diamond necklace as having several synthetic stones mixed with real ones, and pointed out a music box that had its original mechanism replaced with a modern one, significantly reducing its value. Each observation was verified and documented. Hours passed. Lily was patient, methodical, never rushed. Sarah watched in amazement as her daughter moved through the collection, seeing things that had escaped expert examination. But then Lily stopped in front of a simple wooden chest, nothing remarkable about it according to the catalogue. It was listed as a 19th century storage piece, estimated value $2,000. Lily stood very still, staring at it. "Mama, this one is special," she said softly. Richard came over, intrigued. "How so?" Lily walked around the chest, examining it from all angles. "There's something inside, hidden. The bottom isn't right." The curator opened the chest, examined the interior, found nothing unusual. But Lily insisted. "The bottom is too thick. There's space underneath that shouldn't be there." Richard looked at the curator. "Can we examine it more closely?" They brought in tools, carefully measuring the interior dimensions against the exterior. Lily was right. There was approximately 3 inches of unaccounted space in the base. Working carefully, they found a hidden release mechanism, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The false bottom opened. Inside was a collection of documents, letters, and papers, all carefully preserved. The curator began examining them, her hands shaking slightly as she read. "These are personal letters from Cornelius Vanderbilt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Original correspondence, some of it dealing with business decisions that changed American railroad history. And these appear to be stock certificates, original shares in companies that became major corporations." Richard was very quiet. Sarah didn't understand the significance until the curator explained that these documents were historically priceless, worth potentially millions of dollars in the right market. They had been hidden away, forgotten, lost to history until a 6-year-old girl noticed that the bottom of a chest was slightly too thick. The rest of the viewing continued, but the energy in the room had changed. Richard was no longer just documenting observations. He was watching Lily with something close to awe. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. Richard walked Sarah and Lily out to the car personally. Before they got in, he handed Sarah an envelope, the agreed amount plus a bonus for the Vanderbilt letters. "That discovery alone is worth a fortune." Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $200,000. She stared at it, unable to process the number. "I can't accept this," she started, but Richard cut her off. "You can and you will. Your daughter just saved me from multiple bad purchases and led me to a discovery that will make me considerably wealthier. This is business, Mrs. Chen. Fair compensation for valuable services rendered." He paused, then added, "I won't contact you again unless you reach out to me first. I gave you my word about boundaries. and I'll keep it. But I want you to know that if you ever decide to work in this field, you have an open door. Your daughter's gift is extraordinary." During the car ride home, Sarah held the check in her hands, still not quite believing it was real. Lily had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from the long day. Sarah thought about what Rachel had said, about being present for her daughter. This money would give her that chance. She could quit both jobs, go back to school maybe, actually have time to be Lily's mother instead of a ghost who was always working. But she also thought about Richard's words. Other people would want to use Lily's gift. And as Lily got older, what would that mean? Would she be pursued by collectors, dealers, people who saw her only as a tool for their own enrichment? The next week, Sarah deposited the check, paid off every debt, and put the rest into savings. She quit the night cleaning job, but kept the waitressing position, reducing her hours to part-time. For the first time in 18 months, she could breathe. She could pick Lily up from school herself, help with homework, read bedtime stories without falling asleep mid-sentence. Lily seemed happier too, more relaxed, but she still had her gift, and it didn't go away. At the grocery store, she would tell Sarah which fruit was going bad, even though it looked fine. At the playground, she warned another mother that the swing set had a cracked chain before anyone got hurt. The woman had checked, found the crack, and the whole set was replaced the next day. Word spread quietly through their neighborhood. Sarah started getting calls from neighbors, asking if Lily could look at things for them. A man who collected vintage cars wanted Lily to examine an engine. A woman needed help determining if her grandmother's jewelry was real. Sarah politely declined every request. This wasn't going to be Lily's identity. She was a child who happened to have an unusual ability, not a commodity to be rented out. But then a different kind of call came. A police detective named Martinez reached out, his voice careful and professional. There had been a series of art thefts from museums, and the stolen pieces were being replaced with sophisticated forgeries. The museums didn't realize they'd been robbed until months later. They had recovered some of the fakes, but they suspected there might be more that hadn't been identified yet. Would Sarah consider bringing Lily in to examine the museum's collection, just to verify what was real and what wasn't? Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, but Martinez explained that these weren't just thefts. They were crimes against cultural heritage. Irreplaceable works of art were being lost, and without verification, the museums couldn't even begin to track down what had been stolen. He wasn't asking for ongoing help, just one consultation, and Lily's identity would be completely protected. Sarah thought about it for 3 days. She talked to Lily, explained the situation in terms a 6-year-old could understand. Someone had taken things that belonged to everyone, things that were important to history. The police needed help finding out what was missing. Lily listened carefully, then asked, "Would it help people?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, it would help people." Lily thought about it. "Then I want to help." They went to the museum on a Wednesday afternoon when it was closed to the public. Detective Martinez met them at the entrance with the museum director, a woman named Dr. Harrison, who treated Lily with gentle respect. They walked through the galleries together. Lily took her time, examining paintings, sculptures, artifacts. After 2 hours, she had identified 7 pieces as forgeries, 7 works that everyone had believed were authentic. Dr. Harrison was devastated, but grateful. "We would never have known," she said quietly. "The forgeries are that good, but now we know what we've lost, and we can begin the process of recovery." Martinez thanked Sarah and Lily personally. He didn't offer payment, and Sarah didn't ask for any. This had been different from the auction house. This had been about helping, about using Lily's gift for something beyond profit. That night, as Sarah tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked a question that had been coming for a while. "Mama, why can I see things that other people can't?" Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, brushing hair from Lily's forehead. "I don't know exactly, baby, but I think you have a gift, something special that lets you understand things in a way most people can't. And gifts like that come with responsibility." Lily frowned, thinking, "What kind of responsibility?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "The responsibility to use it wisely, to help when you can, but also to protect yourself. Not everyone will understand, and not everyone who wants to use your gift will have good intentions, so we have to be careful about when and how you use it." Lily nodded, satisfied with that answer. She fell asleep quickly, and Sarah sat there for a while longer, watching her daughter breathe steadily in the dim light from the hallway. 3 months passed, and Sarah found herself settling into a rhythm she hadn't experienced since before Marcus died. She returned to school part-time, taking business courses at the community college 3 nights a week. The classes were challenging but energizing. For the first time in years, she was thinking beyond immediate survival, beyond just making it through the next week. She was thinking about the future, about what kind of life she wanted to build for herself and Lily, about possibilities that extended beyond the narrow confines of financial desperation. The money from Richard gave her options she'd never had before, a cushion that allowed her to breathe and plan. But she was also acutely aware that it wouldn't last forever, not if she didn't make smart decisions about how to use it. She needed to plan, to create something sustainable, something that would provide security without requiring her to exploit Lily's gift on a regular basis. During those months, Sarah learned to recognize when people were approaching her with ulterior motives. Word had gotten out in certain circles about what had happened at the Whitmore auction house. She started getting calls from people she'd never met, collectors who somehow had her number, dealers who wanted to discuss potential partnerships. Most were polite but persistent, describing opportunities that always seemed to require Lily's involvement. Sarah developed a practiced way of declining these offers, firm but not rude, making it clear that her daughter was not available for hire. She also noticed changes in how people in her neighborhood treated her. Some were genuinely happy for her improved circumstances, pleased that she no longer looked exhausted every time they saw her. Others were curious in ways that made her uncomfortable, asking probing questions about how she'd come into money, whether Lily had really predicted the earthquake that hit 3 states away the week before. Sarah hadn't even known Lily had said anything about an earthquake until a neighbor mentioned it, and when she asked her daughter about it, Lily just shrugged and said the ground felt wrong when she touched the sidewalk that morning. These small incidents reminded Sarah that Lily's gift was not something that could be kept completely private, not forever. It was part of who her daughter was, and as Lily grew older and more independent, as she interacted with more people and spent more time in the world, others would notice. The question was how to manage that reality, how to prepare Lily for a life where she would always be slightly different, always see things others couldn't. Sarah started taking Lily to a child psychologist, not because there was anything wrong, but because she wanted her daughter to have tools for processing her unique experience of the world. Dr. Williams was recommended by the school counselor, a specialist in gifted children who had experience with kids who didn't fit conventional categories. At first, Lily was resistant, didn't understand why she needed to talk to someone about being able to see things. But Dr. Williams had a gentle way about her, and eventually Lily opened up. She talked about how sometimes it was overwhelming, knowing when things were broken or fake or hiding secrets. She talked about how she'd learned to not always say what she saw because it made people uncomfortable or angry. Dr. Williams helped Lily develop coping strategies, ways to manage the constant input of information that most people never perceived. She also talked with Sarah about the importance of letting Lily have a normal childhood despite her gift, about not making it the central focus of her identity. These sessions became another part of their routine, another piece of building a stable life. Sarah also invested some of the money in creating a college fund for Lily, something that would be there regardless of what happened with her gift or any future business ventures. She hired a financial advisor, learned about investment strategies, took control of their financial future in ways she'd never imagined possible. It was empowering but also sometimes frightening, the weight of responsibility for making decisions that would affect both their lives for years to come. One evening, about 3.5 months after the Whitmore auction, Sarah was studying for a business law exam when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer when she saw Richard's name on the screen, but curiosity won out. Then Richard called. Sarah almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I promised I wouldn't contact you unless you reached out first, and I'm breaking that promise. I apologize, but I have a proposal, and I think you should hear it." Sarah listened. Richard explained that he had been thinking about their arrangement, about how unique Lily's ability was, and how valuable authentic verification was becoming in the art and antiques world. Forgeries were getting better. Technology was making it easier to deceive even experts. But Lily's gift couldn't be fooled by technology. He wanted to create a business, a legitimate authentication service, With Sarah as the owner and director, Lily would be involved only when Sarah approved it, under strict conditions protecting her identity and well-being. Richard would provide the startup capital and connections. Sarah would build the business, hire experts to work alongside Lily's observations, create a reputable firm that could command serious fees in the market. Think about it, Richard said. You'd be in control. You'd set the terms. Lily would never be exploited. And you'd be building something that could provide for both of you long-term, something that might even outlast Lily's gift if it ever fades as she gets older. You'd be creating security on your own terms. Sarah said she would think about it, and Richard accepted that. But this time felt different from the first offer. This wasn't about a single transaction. This was about building something, about taking control of a situation rather than being controlled by it. Sarah talked to Rachel again, laid out the proposal in detail. Rachel was skeptical at first, but as Sarah explained her vision, how she could structure it, how she could protect Lily while also creating opportunity, Rachel began to see the potential. "You'd really be in charge?" Rachel asked. Sarah nodded. "Complete control. Richard would be a silent investor, nothing more. I'd hire the staff, choose the clients, decide when and if Lily participates. And I'd build a real business around it, not just Lily's ability. We'd have conventional authentication methods, expert staff, everything a legitimate firm would have. Lily's gift would just be one tool among many." Rachel studied her sister. "You've changed. 3 months ago, you were terrified of all this. Now you're talking about building a company." Sarah smiled. 3 months ago, I was drowning. I was too tired to think beyond the next day. Now I can actually plan, actually imagine a future. And I realize that Lily's gift isn't going to go away. People are going to know about it eventually. I can either hide from that and let other people control the narrative, or I can take control myself and build something ethical and sustainable around it. The decision wasn't easy, and Sarah spent weeks weighing every angle before committing. She talked to lawyers about protecting Lily's identity and rights, consulted with business advisors about the viability of Richard's proposal, and spent hours researching authentication businesses to understand what she would be getting into. She made lists of pros and cons, conducted financial projections, and interviewed other business owners to learn from their experiences. Rachel was her sounding board through all of it, sometimes encouraging, sometimes cautioning, always honest about the risks and opportunities she saw. Sarah knew that whatever decision she made would shape not just her own future, but Lily's as well. And that weight kept her up many nights, staring at the ceiling and running through scenarios in her mind. But ultimately, Sarah made the decision based on a simple realization. Lily's gift wasn't going to disappear, and hiding from it wasn't protecting her daughter. It was just postponing the inevitable moment when they would have to figure out how to integrate this ability into their lives. She could either let that happen passively, reacting to circumstances and other people's agendas, or she could take control proactively and build something ethical and sustainable on her own terms. When she finally agreed to Richard's proposal, it was with absolute clarity about what she wanted to create. She spent 6 months planning and building the business infrastructure, treating it as seriously as any major corporation would treat a startup. She hired 2 experienced art historians with impeccable credentials from reputable institutions, an antiques expert who had worked at Sotheby's for 15 years, and a business manager who had run operations for a boutique consulting firm. She interviewed dozens of candidates for each position, checking references meticulously, making sure she was bringing on people who shared her values and understood the ethical complexities of what they would be doing. She rented office space in a professional building downtown, nothing ostentatious but respectable and well located. She worked with a designer to create a professional but warm environment, wanting the space to feel legitimate without being intimidating. She established strict ethical guidelines that went far beyond industry standards, creating protocols for how cases would be evaluated, how Lily's involvement would be managed, how conflicts of interest would be handled, and how sensitive information would be protected. Every detail was documented, every process was carefully thought through, every decision was made with long-term sustainability in mind. She also spent considerable time developing a legal framework that would protect Lily. She worked with an attorney who specialized in child welfare and employment law to create contracts that made it absolutely clear that Lily was not an employee, that her participation was voluntary and could be withdrawn at any time. and that all financial benefits from her involvement would be held in trust for her until she reached adulthood. Sarah wanted to make sure that if anyone ever questioned whether she was exploiting her daughter, there would be ironclad evidence that Lily's interests were being protected at every turn. The firm was called Chen Verification Services, a name that emphasized Sarah's ownership and control while being professional and straightforward. Lily's involvement was minimal and carefully managed from the very beginning. Sarah brought her in only for the most difficult and important cases, situations where conventional authentication methods had failed, or where there were significant questions that couldn't be resolved through traditional analysis. These consultations were always scheduled on weekends or after school, never interfering with Lily's education or social life. Lily would spend maybe an hour or two a week examining pieces when needed, always with Sarah present, always under controlled conditions with proper supervision and support. The sessions were structured to be interesting rather than demanding, more like solving puzzles than performing work. Sarah made sure Lily understood she could stop at any time, could say no to any request, and that her participation was genuinely voluntary rather than expected or required. The rest of the business ran on the expertise of the hired staff, but word spread anyway. Collectors began specifically requesting Lily's verification, willing to pay premium rates for her analysis. Sarah had to turn down more work than she accepted, maintaining strict boundaries about Lily's participation. She never wanted her daughter to feel like a circus performer, never wanted the gift to define Lily's entire identity. Lily was now 8 years old, in 3rd grade, and living a remarkably normal life. She had friends, played soccer, loved reading fantasy novels. Her gift was just something she did occasionally, like how some kids helped in their parents' stores or offices. It was part of her life, but not the whole of it. One afternoon, a potential client came to the office, a woman named Mrs. Davenport, who claimed to have a painting by Vermeer, one of only 34 known works by the Dutch master. If authentic, it would be worth tens of millions of dollars. She wanted verification before approaching auction houses. Sarah conducted the initial consultation, explaining their process and fees. Mrs. Davenport agreed to everything, and the painting was brought in for examination. Sarah's staff examined it first, using every conventional method available. Their conclusion was that it was likely authentic, though they couldn't be absolutely certain. The provenance was good, but not perfect, and some of the materials tested consistent with the period, but weren't definitively conclusive. Sarah brought Lily in on a Saturday morning. The painting was set up in the examination room under proper lighting. Lily walked around it slowly, studying it from different angles. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "It's real, but it's also not finished." Sarah and the staff exchanged glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Lily pointed to certain areas of the canvas. "He started it, painted most of it, but then he stopped. Someone else finished these parts later, not trying to fake it, just completing something he left unfinished." The staff brought in specialized equipment to analyze the brush strokes and paint layering in the areas Lily had indicated. She was right. There were 2 distinct hands visible in the work, both from the same approximate period, but one was clearly Vermeer, and the other was likely a student or contemporary who had completed the unfinished portions after his death. The discovery was significant. The painting was authentic Vermeer, but it was also a collaborative piece, which affected its value and historical importance. Mrs. Davenport was initially disappointed that it wasn't a pure Vermeer, but she came to appreciate the unique nature of what she owned. The piece eventually sold at auction for $12 million, and Mrs. Davenport sent Sarah a generous bonus, along with a thank you note, praising Lily's insight. These kinds of discoveries became the hallmark of Chen Verification Services. They didn't just authenticate or debunk. They uncovered stories, revealed hidden truths about objects that changed how people understood art and history. And through it all, Sarah kept her promise to herself. Lily remained protected, her identity kept private, her participation voluntary and limited. The business thrived because it was legitimate, ethical, and extraordinarily accurate. 5 years after that first day at the Whitmore Estate auction house, Sarah looked back on how far they had come. Lily was now 11, transitioning into middle school, still remarkably well-adjusted, despite her unusual ability. The gift hadn't faded as she got older. If anything, it had become more refined, more precise, but it was still just one part of who she was. Sarah had built a successful business, earned a degree in art history, and created financial security. that would have seemed impossible during those desperate months after Marcus died. She employed 12 people now, ran a respected firm, and had established protocols that were being studied by authentication experts worldwide. But more important than any of that, she had time with her daughter. Real time, quality time, the kind of presence that mattered. They still had dinner together every night, still read books together, still talked about everything from homework to dreams to the moral implications of Lily's gift. Richard had become a friend over the years, someone Sarah could trust for business advice. He'd kept his word about being a silent investor, never pushed for more access to Lily, never exploited the connection. He attended the firm's anniversary parties and occasionally sent Lily books he thought she'd enjoy, but otherwise maintained professional distance. One evening, as Sarah and Lily sat together on their apartment balcony watching the sunset, Lily asked a question she'd been building toward for years. "Mama, do you ever wish I was just normal? That I didn't have this gift?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She thought about that desperate woman in the auction house 5 years ago, dismissed and invisible. She thought about the journey they'd taken, the challenges and opportunities, the careful balancing act of protecting Lily while honoring her abilities. "No," Sarah said finally, "I don't wish you were different, but I'm glad we figured out how to make your gift work for us instead of letting it control us. Does that make sense?" Lily nodded. "I think so. It's like the gift is part of me, but it's not all of me." Sarah smiled and pulled her daughter close. "Exactly. You're Lily Chen. You're smart, kind, funny, terrible at keeping your room clean, excellent at soccer, and yes, you can see things other people can't. That's just one of many things that make you who you are." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah thought about Richard's words from years ago, about how Lily's gift was rare and how people would want to use it. He'd been right, but what he hadn't understood then, what Sarah herself had to learn, was that rarity didn't mean exploitation had to follow. With the right boundaries, the right protection, the right priorities, even the most unusual gift could be integrated into a normal, healthy life. The business would continue, would probably grow. There would be more discoveries, more remarkable finds, more moments when Lily's ability revealed truths that changed understanding of art and history. But there would also be soccer games and school plays and birthday parties and all the ordinary moments that made up a childhood. Because that was what Sarah had really been fighting for all along. Not wealth, not success, not even security, though all those things mattered. She'd been fighting for her daughter to have a choice, to have agency over her own gift, to be seen as a whole person rather than a tool or a curiosity. And standing there on the balcony, watching Lily sketch in her notebook, completely absorbed in creating something of her own, rather than analyzing what others had created, Sarah knew they had succeeded. The rich buyer who had dismissed them in that auction house had been wrong, not just about the value they could provide, though he'd certainly been wrong about that. He'd been wrong about who they were, what they were worth, what they could become. Sarah and Lily had proven that worth not by seeking his approval, but by building something on their own terms, by taking control of a gift that could have controlled them, by choosing their own path forward. The hidden fortune Lily's power had uncovered wasn't just the Vanderbilt letters or the various discoveries that had made Sarah's business successful. The real fortune was the life they'd built together, the security and autonomy and love that filled their days. That was the treasure that mattered most, and nobody could ever take it away.